Hello and welcome to my first ever YouTube tutorial. My name's Elise, but online I go by Porzellan Cosplay. In this tutorial I will be going over how I made my Love Live Winter Fairy wings, using my 3D printer and some resin. I hope you enjoy! If you're interested in more of my work, I have my links to my social media listed in the description below. To make my wings, I start off by modeling them in the program Fusion 360. Fusion is free for students and makers and is a great piece of software for 3D printing. The first thing I'm doing is drawing a reference of how big my 3D print bed is, since I want these wings to be as big as possible but still print in one piece. After I have my reference square drawn, I create a sketch and simply start tracing out the wings. For this I mainly use the spline tool to create the curves, and the offset tool to give the borders a consistent thickness. For the areas that the reference photo doesn't show, like behind her shoulders, you can make them look how you want. On all of the girls' card art it doesn't actually show this area, so don't worry too much about making them correct. So once our sketch is done, I'm going to be using the extrude tool to bring it to life. I gave the wings a thickness of 3 mm. One of my favorite features about Fusion 360 is that it has a parametric timeline, meaning you can go back at any time and alter your sketch, and it'll update the rest of your model. This makes it easy to fix up any mistakes later on. Next up, we're going to add a dowel attachment to our wings. In this case, the frame is going to be a simple U-shape made out of wooden dowels that sits along our back. First, I create a cylinder the same dimensions as our dowel, which in my case was 9 mm, and move them into position. I want to make sure that the dowel attachment still fits on our print bed, so I adjust my reference to make sure it still fits in the square. To attach the dowel to our wing, first I begin by drawing out a simple rectangle. Afterwards, I'm extruding it and then rounding off the edges with the fillet tool. After we have everything in place, we will cut out the slot for our wooden dowel. You can easily do this with the combine tool with the cut mode. I like to add a little extra space in there for extra tolerance, just in case the dowel is slightly bigger than it says it is. To make the bottom rung of our U-shape, I'm going to be copying over our dowel and rotating it 90 degrees. The corner back will be made in a similar way, only this one will have two cylinders forming an angle instead. To do this, simply make your two cylinders, align them so they are intersecting, and combine them. This will form them into one body, which we can cut our dowel slots into. Add some fillets and you're done! And that's it, we're done with the 3D modeling. Next up is printing. These were printed on my CR10 printer, and it took roughly 3 hours to print each wing. I highly recommend this model of printer for cosplay use, since they have a very large build volume and a very cheap price. I also have an affiliate link below for this model of printer if you're interested in checking it out. I will also have a link to the wings frames for sale on my Etsy if you'd rather just purchase them instead. Ta-da! This is what the wings look like fresh off the printer. And here are our finished corner brackets as well. After printing, I gave them a quick coat of filler primer to help fill in any gaps, along with prepare them for the paint. 2 coats of gold spray paint later and our wings are nearly finished. Before we begin the fun part with the resin, we'll need to coat the back of the wings with tape. I used clear packaging tape for my wings and it worked out very well. You will need to take your time with this step, since the smoother you get the tape, the better your wings will look. Make sure you overlap each layer, otherwise you risk the resin leaking out before it is fully cured. Now it's finally time to add the resin. I used a simple clear 1:1 epoxy resin for my wings, but any clear resin should work. Just make sure to follow your specific instructions. In my case, I had to use an equal part resin to hardener ratio and then mix for 5 minutes. After thoroughly mixing the resin, I begin to slowly fill in each section. It's handy to have a reference photo on hand, since each of the girls has a different color palette for their wings. In my case, I was making Yo's wings, which is made up of multiple shades of blue. I started off with the lightest sections first, which in my case was white. I ended up doing this in several different batches, just to make sure I had enough working time with the resin before it started to cure. To color the resin, I used glitter, along with some blue alcohol ink to tint the resin. Slowly and carefully begin to fill in the rest of the sections. My table wasn't quite level, so I had to add some popsicle stick shims to my wings to make sure that the resin didn't leak over. This project is a lot of fun for getting to use different colors of glitter. I happen to have a large collection from garage sales, so I'm glad I finally got to use it for something. After doing 4 separate batches of resin and letting it cure for 24 hours, my wings were nearly finished. Here they are after all the sections are filled in. I made a tiny bit of a mess by getting some of the resin onto the frame, but don't worry, we'll fix that up afterwards. After peeling off the tape from earlier, unfortunately my paint chipped a little bit, but I was able to fix it up with some acrylic paint afterwards. Finally, the last step for our wings is to add a final top coat. This will help cover up any mistakes, give it a nice glossy finish, and as well as improve the strength of the wings. To assemble the frames, I cut my dowels into 3 pieces. In my case, each of these pieces was 20 centimeters long. However, you should measure the distance between your shoulder blades and your back length to decide how long your pieces should be. I glued the bottom ring of our U together, but kept the wings unattached so we could change the angle for different photos and store them easier when they're not in use. To wear the wings, simply slide the U-shape down your back while wearing a tight-fitting clothing, such as a corset. Alternatively, you could also tie the dowels to your back across your chest with ribbons to hold them down. And that's it, your wings are finally finished. Thank you for checking out my first tutorial, and I'll be back again soon. Bye bye!